Rebecca Collins, a seasoned flight attendant, started her day like any other, meticulously preparing for her Charlotte to New York flight. With years of experience under her belt, she felt confident and ready. But as she interacted with Michael Johnson, a police officer seated in first class, Rebecca's unspoken prejudices surfaced. Her offhand remarks and evident discomfort sparked a tense atmosphere on board. The situation escalated when the interaction was captured on video and went viral, leading to widespread public outrage. As Rebecca faced the fallout and a suspension from her job, she was left to grapple with the harsh reality of her actions and the profound impact they had on her life and career. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Rebecca Collins meticulously prepared for another day of work, her routine honed to perfection over her 15 years as a flight attendant. Each movement was deliberate and practiced. She carefully buttoned her dark blue uniform, adjusted her neckerchief with an exacting touch, and pinned her blonde hair into a flawless bun. Standing before the mirror, she scrutinized her reflection, checking every detail with a trained eye. Everything appeared as it should, just like any other day, and she felt ready for the challenges ahead. That morning, Rebecca was set to work a flight from Charlotte to New York. As she arrived at the airport, the aircraft was already being prepped for departure. Rebecca joined her fellow crew members for their routine pre-flight checks, a process she approached with familiar ease. She relished her job, the travel, the brief but engaging interactions with passengers, and the control she exerted over the organization and smooth operation within the aircraft. As passengers began boarding, Rebecca maintained her practiced vigilance. She had developed a habit of quickly sizing up each individual who stepped onto the plane, a practice shaped by years of experience and personal biases. Among the passengers, she noticed a man dressed in a police uniform making his way down the aisle. His confident stride and authoritative bearing suggested he was someone accustomed to respect and command. He settled into a seat in first class, and Rebecca's brow furrowed in immediate, unspoken judgment. What is he doing here, she thought, her mind racing with assumptions. How could he possibly afford a first-class ticket? Once boarding was complete and the plane was preparing for takeoff, Rebecca approached the man. Her demeanor was formal and cold, almost as if her professionalism was masking a deeper, less visible prejudice. "May I see your ticket, sir?" she asked, her tone carrying an undertone of suspicion. Despite her attempt to maintain a polite smile, her eyes betrayed a hint of her internal conflict. Michael Johnson, the man in the police uniform, looked up from organizing his belongings with a mixture of surprise and resignation. He had encountered such reactions before and had come to expect them. With a calm smile, he handed over his ticket. Rebecca took it, scrutinizing it with an exaggerated sense of diligence, as though she were on the verge of uncovering a discrepancy. After a thorough, if somewhat theatrical, examination, she confirmed that everything was in order and returned the ticket with a hint of reluctance. "Thank you," she said, her voice lacking its usual warmth. "Just wanted to make sure you were in the right place." Michael accepted the ticket with a steady smile, though a flicker of disappointment was evident in his eyes. "No problem, I understand," he replied, striving to diffuse any potential tension. Despite his attempts to remain composed, the interaction was a reminder of the challenges he faced regularly. Rebecca walked away, but her thoughts were unsettled. Throughout the flight, she found herself glancing over at Michael intermittently, her mind grappling with the uneasy feeling that somehow he did not belong in the first-class cabin, despite the clear evidence to the contrary. As the plane ascended into the sky, Rebecca tried to direct her attention to her tasks, but an unsettling feeling persisted, refusing to dissipate. Michael, however, remained composed in his seat, engrossed in a book while subtly ignoring the inquisitive stares of fellow passengers. Despite his calm demeanor, Rebecca's unease intensified, foreshadowing the tension that was about to unfold. The flight, bound for New York, progressed smoothly under clear skies and with the aircraft cruising steadily at 35,000 feet. The first-class passengers, including Michael, settled into their plush seats, enjoying the enhanced comfort and luxury that the section afforded. Meanwhile, Rebecca diligently carried out her duties, serving beverages and checking on the passengers. Yet her focus repeatedly shifted towards Michael, whose serenity seemed almost conspicuous. When Rebecca approached Michael once more to offer refreshments, she tried to maintain a neutral tone, though it was clear that she struggled to fully mask a hint of disdain. "Coffee, sir?" she asked, her voice striving for professionalism, but betraying a trace of her underlying discomfort. "Yes, please." "Black." "No sugar," Michael replied, his polite smile a contrast to Rebecca's increasingly strained composure. As Rebecca prepared the coffee, her thoughts were clouded by an unbidden prejudice, an irrational curiosity about why someone like Michael was seated in first class, as if his presence there were incongruous. Upon delivering the coffee, Rebecca's restraint faltered, and she felt compelled to probe further. "I assume you're traveling for work?" she inquired, attempting to sound casual but failing to completely suppress the edge in her tone. Michael looked up from his book, meeting her gaze with an awareness of the unspoken question she was hinting at. "Yes, I am," Michael replied, his voice steady. "I'm a police officer from Atlanta, heading to New York for a conference on public safety." Rebecca's reaction was one of surprise, her expectations upended by his response, which only deepened her discomfort. "Oh, I see," she said, though her mind remained conflicted and unsettled. "It must be quite interesting." Michael, sensing her discomfort, chose not to extend the conversation, aware of the direction it might take. But before he could return to his book, Rebecca's curiosity, tinged with a subtle prejudice, compelled her to ask further. "Did the company cover the cost of your first-class ticket?" The question emerged almost involuntarily, laden with an implication that she did not bother to veil. For a brief moment, Michael's expression hardened, but he responded with calm dignity. "I paid the difference for the first class out of my pocket. I prefer to travel comfortably when I can." His response was measured, carrying an underlying weight, as if he were striving to maintain his dignity in the face of Rebecca's thinly veiled judgment. Rebecca felt a chill as she realized she had crossed a line. Though she recognized her prejudice, she struggled to fully acknowledge that Michael had every right to be in first class. "I understand," she said, attempting to regain control of the situation and mask her growing sense of discomfort. "If you need anything else, I'll be around." She quickly moved away, trying to conceal the mounting unease that now enveloped her, as the shadows of her own biases loomed large. But the conversation hadn't escaped the notice of other passengers. As Rebecca and Michael's interaction unfolded, several travelers exchanged glances that spoke volumes of disapproval. It was evident that they had picked up on the subtle, yet palpable, hostility that had laced Rebecca's words and tone towards Michael. Michael sighed deeply and attempted to return to his book, but his mind was far from the pages. The veiled animosity he had just encountered was not a novel experience for him, yet it always managed to leave a lingering mark each time it occurred. In the cabin, Rebecca struggled to regain her composure. The impact of Michael's gaze had penetrated her deeply, as if he had peered into her very soul, unearthing her insecurities and underlying prejudices. The feeling of exposure and vulnerability was unsettling, and she found herself uncomfortable with the sense that her true self had been laid bare. As the minutes dragged on, Rebecca busied herself with her duties, trying to distract from the discomfort settling in her conscience. She recognized, on some level, that her behavior had been inappropriate, but she was unable to confront or rectify it directly. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. The flight continued its smooth ascent above the clouds, but within the cabin, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. Despite Rebecca's efforts to avoid dwelling on the earlier exchange with Michael, she could not escape the persistent, uneasy sensation that clung to her. Her nervousness began to manifest in her actions, making her increasingly self-conscious. As Rebecca went about serving drinks and collecting trays, she became acutely aware that several passengers were observing her closely. It felt as if they were scrutinizing her every move, their gaze a silent judgment of her conduct towards Michael. The discomfort intensified as she found herself deliberately avoiding eye contact with him, redirecting her focus to her other tasks in an attempt to evade further scrutiny. In the row adjacent to Michael, a young couple whispered animatedly to each other, clearly perturbed by what they had witnessed. The man with his smartphone in hand seemed to be recording the scene, though Rebecca could not discern if she was the subject of his camera. She caught fragments of their conversation, which only heightened her anxiety. "Did you see how she spoke to him?" the woman beside the man whispered urgently. "Yeah, that was odd." "Unnecessary," the man replied, still engrossed in his recording. Rebecca's stomach churned as she overheard their murmurs. Her sense of wrongdoing was now compounded by the fear of potential repercussions. Instead of confronting her actions, she found herself grappling with the need to justify them internally. She moved to the front of the cabin, but her focus was shattered. Her thoughts were consumed by Michael, the couple observing her, and the unsettling possibility that her actions might have been captured on camera. The anxiety mounted with every passing moment. Meanwhile, Michael, despite his attempts to immerse himself in his book, was acutely aware of the unease surrounding him. The stares, whispers, and subtle tension were impossible to ignore. He had encountered covert forms of racism before, hidden within subtle gestures and veiled comments, but the current situation left him feeling particularly exposed and scrutinized. Determined to address the issue without escalating it further, Michael discreetly signaled for Rebecca as she passed his row once more. "Flight attendant, may I have a word with you?" His voice was calm yet carried an unmistakable firmness that Rebecca could not overlook. Surprised by his request, she turned to face him. "Of course, sir. How can I assist you?" she replied, striving to maintain a composed demeanor. Michael lowered his voice, ensuring that their conversation remained private from other passengers. "I noticed that our last interaction might have. I want to make it clear that, like any other passenger on this flight, I have paid for my seat and expect to receive the same level of respect and consideration as everyone else. I fully understand that your role is to ensure the comfort of all passengers, and I genuinely appreciate that." Michael's words were a soft yet pointed critique, delivered in a way that was not confrontational but rather intended to allow Rebecca to reflect on her actions. Rebecca felt a sharp pang of guilt and shame at Michael's words. Her immediate response, however, was one of defensiveness. "Sir, I'm just doing my job. There's no need for concern, everything is under control," she said, attempting to convey reassurance with a smile. Unfortunately, her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Michael gave a nod in acknowledgement, but his gaze lingered on hers for a few moments longer, as if trying to communicate something profound that words alone could not convey. "I understand," Michael said calmly. "I just wanted to ensure we're on the same page." He leaned back in his seat, signaling the end of their conversation. As Rebecca walked away, the exchange of words continued to echo in her mind. Michael's handling of the situation, marked by politeness and assertiveness, made her feel even more diminished in the face of her conscience. Unbeknownst to Rebecca, the moment had been captured on video by the passenger seated next to her. During the in-flight service, the couple who had witnessed the interaction began sharing the video on social media. Their outrage over Michael's treatment quickly gained traction, and what had started as a private disagreement was rapidly becoming a public spectacle, a storm brewing as the flight neared New York. Rebecca felt an undefined but palpable weight of unease. The true impact of her actions was only beginning to unfold. As the plane began its descent toward New York's airport, the atmosphere in the cabin grew increasingly tense. Rebecca felt her anxiety heightening with every passing minute, as if a looming disaster was imminent. She struggled to maintain a professional demeanor, but her discomfort was becoming more evident. As passengers readied themselves to disembark, Rebecca noticed a growing buzz among them. People were looking at their phones, whispering to one another, and casting occasional glances in her direction. The unease she had felt during the flight had now evolved into a silent panic. Michael, on the other hand, remained outwardly calm, though he too sensed the charged atmosphere. Despite his efforts to ignore the situation during the flight, he knew that the incident was far from over. When he stood to retrieve his carry-on bag, the lingering stares he received only confirmed his suspicions. Once the plane had landed, Rebecca hurried to prepare for passenger disembarkation, her smile forced and tight as she guided passengers off the plane. As Michael passed by, he looked her in the eyes one last time, his expression a mix of exhaustion and understanding. "Have a good day, sir," Rebecca said, her smile failing to mask her anxiety. "Thank you. I hope you have a good day as well," Michael replied, his calm demeanor sharply contrasting with Rebecca's internal turmoil. After all the passengers had disembarked, Rebecca felt a brief moment of relief. However, that relief quickly turned into escalating fear when the flight captain, an experienced man she had worked with on numerous occasions, called her aside for a private conversation. "Rebecca, I need you to come with me," the captain said, his tone serious and lacking the usual warmth. Rebecca followed him to a designated area in the airport, where an airline supervisor was already waiting. The supervisor, a middle-aged man with a stern expression, held a tablet in his hands. "Rebecca, we need to discuss an incident that occurred during the flight," he said, showing her the screen of the tablet. Rebecca glanced at the screen and felt her heart plummet. There, playing repeatedly, was the video of her confrontation with Michael, already shared by thousands on social media. The accompanying caption was direct and condemning flight attendant racist confronts black police officer in first class. The ground seemed to give way beneath her, as her worst fears were coming to fruition. This isn't what it looks like," Rebecca stammered, desperately grasping for an explanation. "I was just checking." "Rebecca, your intention is not the issue here," the supervisor interrupted with a firm, authoritative tone. "What truly matters is how the situation has been perceived. To be frank, the gravity of this situation is substantial. The airline is currently facing immense public scrutiny and pressure. Therefore, we need to launch an internal investigation immediately. Until this process is completed, you are suspended from your duties." If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. The words struck Rebecca like a physical blow, sending a jolt of fear and disbelief through her body. The suspension was not just a temporary setback, it was a significant blow to her career. Her mind raced frantically, desperately searching for a way to rectify the situation, but the finality in her supervisor's voice left little room for negotiation. "Please let me explain," she began, her voice barely more than a whisper, betraying the panic and helplessness she felt inside. "Rebecca, I understand this is a challenging and distressing moment for you," the supervisor said, now with a tone that was calmer but still conveyed the seriousness of the situation. "However, it is crucial for you to grasp the seriousness of what has occurred. At this point, the best course of action is for you to go home and await further communication from the company. We will keep you informed about the progress of the investigation." Rebecca struggled to contain the tears welling up in her eyes, fighting against the overwhelming sense of despair that threatened to engulf her. The shock of the situation was almost too much to bear. Her routine had been upended in an instant, and what had started as an ordinary workday was rapidly devolving into a public relations nightmare. With her shoulders drooping and her gaze cast downward, Rebecca trudged away, acutely aware that a new and uncertain chapter of her life was unfolding, one for which she felt woefully unprepared. Upon arriving home later that day, Rebecca was emotionally and physically drained. The weight of the suspension bore down heavily on her, but the true gravity of her predicament became even more apparent as she observed the unfolding public reaction online. Entering her modest apartment in Charlotte, she immediately turned on her computer to check social media. To her dismay, the video of the incident had already gone viral. The comment section was a barrage of vitriolic reactions. Words like racist, prejudiced, and unacceptable were recurring themes, while many commenters demanded that the airline take severe disciplinary action. Rebecca's heart raced as she scanned the comments, the fear of the situation escalating further, morphing into a full-blown panic. The scale of the public outrage was beyond anything she had anticipated. Her phone buzzed with a new text message from a concerned coworker. "Rebecca, have you seen what's happening? The video is everywhere, and people are furious. The company will have to issue a statement." A lump formed in Rebecca's throat as she tried to process the overwhelming influx of information. She attempted to call her friend for support, but the call went straight to voicemail. Left alone to confront the fallout, Rebecca felt a profound sense of isolation. A few minutes later, her phone rang, and it was her mother. "Rebecca, my dear, what's going on? I saw the video. There's a lot of backlash against you on social media. Are you okay?" Her mother's voice was filled with concern and worry. "I don't know, Mom." Rebecca's voice quivered as she struggled to keep it steady. "I'm at a loss. I never intended for this to happen. Everything feels like it's spiraling out of control." "This will eventually pass, sweetheart, but you need to stay strong right now," her mother offered soothingly. "Perhaps maybe you should consider making a public statement to clarify what happened. It might help to explain your side of the story." Rebecca absorbed her mother's advice, feeling both comforted and overwhelmed. She knew that taking action was essential, but the path forward seemed daunting and fraught with challenges. Rebecca hesitated, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. She was acutely aware that anything she said could easily be misinterpreted, yet she knew she had to take some action to address the situation. After ending the tense call with her mother, Rebecca turned to her Twitter account, hoping to find some way to manage the fallout. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, grappling with the gravity of her words. Each potential message seemed either insincere or overly desperate. The weight of the situation pressed down on her, making it difficult to find the right words. After much deliberation, she typed out a message, her resolve wavering with each keystroke. "I am deeply sorry for what happened. I am reflecting on my actions and know I need to do better. It was never my intention to offend anyone. But I fully acknowledge the impact my words have had. I am committed to learning from this experience and growing as a person." Rebecca scrutinized the message repeatedly, her anxiety building with each read through. She wondered if her apology was sufficient or if it came across as too superficial. After what felt like an eternity, she finally hit send, bracing herself for the inevitable backlash. Within moments, her notifications exploded. Comments flooded in, a mixed torrent of support and criticism. Some users expressed empathy and encouragement, applauding her willingness to own up to her mistakes. Others, however, accused her of issuing a hollow apology merely to salvage her reputation now that the incident had come to light. The media frenzy around the incident was intensifying. Newspapers and television channels began to cover the story extensively, amplifying the pressure on the airline involved. Civil rights lawyers and activists joined the conversation, underscoring the urgency of addressing systemic racism and its pervasive impact across all sectors of society. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the city, Michael Johnson sat at home, grappling with the swift escalation of the situation. He was fully aware that the video had gone viral, but the rapidity of the unfolding drama was startling. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages from friends, colleagues, and journalists seeking his comment. Michael was hesitant to speak publicly. He did not want to come across as seeking attention or exacting revenge. His primary goal was to foster a meaningful dialogue about racism and prejudice, but he understood that his words needed to be carefully measured to avoid further misinterpretation. After much consideration, he decided to issue a straightforward statement on his social media page. As many of you have seen, an incident occurred during a recent flight. While the situation is unfortunate, I hope we can use this moment to reflect on how we treat one another. Regardless of race or social standing, we must engage in open dialogue and cultivate understanding rather than judgment. Let's strive together to build a more just and equitable world. Michael's post received widespread praise. His measured and dignified response was lauded by many, and his followers began to encourage him to play a more active role in discussions on social justice. In contrast, Rebecca continued to face a relentless storm of criticism. She was painfully aware of her mistake, yet felt paralyzed by her uncertainty about how to make amends. Each passing hour intensified the weight of her actions, transforming what started as a minor lapse in judgment into a profound personal crisis. The situation forced her to confront and grapple with her shortcomings and biases. In the days following the incident, Rebecca was engulfed in a maelstrom of emotions. She felt increasingly isolated, as though the world was collapsing around her. Her phone rang incessantly with calls from reporters, acquaintances, and even strangers. Social media remained a barrage of critical comments, and her public apology seemed to have done little to mitigate the backlash. One morning, a week after the flight, Rebecca received a call she had anticipated but was nonetheless unprepared for. It was her supervisor, and the gravity of the situation became even more palpable as she braced herself for the conversation that lay ahead. "Rebecca, we need you to come to the office immediately," he said, his voice leaving no room for negotiation or delay. His tone was cold and unyielding, making it clear that this was an urgent matter. With her heart pounding in her chest and a sense of dread settling over her, Rebecca quickly prepared herself and made her way to the airline's office. The trip felt interminable, each passing moment laden with anxiety and uncertainty. Her thoughts raced as she wondered what awaited her at the end of this unsettling journey. Upon arriving at the office, Rebecca was escorted directly to the meeting room, bypassing the usual hustle and bustle of her workplace. As the door swung open, she was met with the sight of her supervisor and two other high-ranking company executives. Their faces were grim and serious, an unspoken acknowledgement of the severity of the situation. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment on number 3 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. "Rebecca, I'm going to be direct with you," her supervisor began, his voice heavy with the weight of the moment. He took a deep breath, as if bracing himself for what was to come. "The company has decided to suspend you indefinitely until the investigation is completed. Given the fallout from the recent incident, we cannot allow you to continue in your role at this time." A crushing wave of despair washed over Rebecca, nearly immobilizing her. Though she had anticipated this possibility, hearing the formal announcement felt like a blow to the gut. Her mind raced as she struggled to maintain her composure, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. "I understand that my actions may have been inappropriate," she said, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to sound steady. "I want to fully cooperate with the investigation. Please understand that I never intended to cause harm. I was simply doing my job to the best of my ability." One of the executives, his voice softer yet equally firm, addressed her with a note of empathy. "Rebecca, we recognize that you are genuinely remorseful. But the reality is that the impact of your actions extends far beyond your initial intentions. We have a responsibility to demonstrate to the public and our employees that we take these matters seriously. This suspension is a necessary step to uphold that responsibility." Rebecca's head hung low as she fought to keep her emotions in check. The sting of the situation was almost unbearable, and she was determined not to break down in front of them. "I just want to make things right," she whispered, almost as if speaking to herself rather than to the stern faces before her. The supervisor hesitated for a moment, as if carefully considering how to frame his next words. "Rebecca, there is an opportunity for redemption, but it will depend significantly on how you handle yourself moving forward. This suspension does not have to mark the end of your career, but you will need to work diligently to rebuild the trust of the company, the passengers, and the public." Rebecca nodded numbly, though the reassurance in his words felt like a distant comfort. Her mind was consumed by the upheaval in her life, and she struggled to envision a path forward. "Thank you," she said softly, rising from her chair. "I'll do whatever it takes." With that, she left the room, each step feeling like a burden. As she returned home, she was greeted by an oppressive silence. The emptiness of her surroundings mirrored the void she felt within. Sinking onto the couch, Rebecca clutched a pillow tightly, as if it were her only connection to a semblance of normalcy. The tears she had been holding back finally flowed freely, her sobs a release of the overwhelming weight of her circumstances. In the days that followed, with her suspension in effect, Rebecca found herself alone with her thoughts. The absence of work left her with an unrelenting focus on the gravity of her actions and the deep-seated flaws in her beliefs. Each news update about the incident served as a painful reminder of her failures, both to Michael and to herself. One afternoon, as she aimlessly scrolled through the internet, she stumbled upon a video featuring Michael. He was being interviewed, his demeanor calm and composed as he discussed the incident. His words struck a chord with Rebecca, revealing a perspective she hadn't fully grasped before. "What happened on that flight isn't just about me," Michael said in the video, his voice steady. "It's a reflection of the broader issues that many people face every day in various forms. I hold no grudges, but I believe it's time we start having difficult conversations and making meaningful changes." Rebecca watched in silence, the weight of his message settling heavily on her shoulders. The video was a poignant reminder of the broader implications of her actions and the urgent need for change both in her own life and in the world around her. His words struck a deep chord within Rebecca, creating a ripple effect that she hadn't anticipated. She had been so wrapped up in her troubles and perspective that she had failed to see the broader impact of her actions. She had not truly considered the effect her behavior might have on Michael or on others who face prejudice and discrimination daily. This epiphany was nothing short of a turning point for Rebecca. She understood now that her apology alone was insufficient. It was clear that she needed to undergo a profound transformation. Determined to educate herself, Rebecca embarked on an extensive search for resources related to social justice. She immersed herself in a wealth of information articles, videos, and academic papers about racism and prejudice. Each new piece of knowledge left her feeling increasingly disheartened by her past actions, but also fueled her resolve to do better. Yet she recognized that acquiring knowledge was only part of the solution. She needed to translate her newfound understanding into meaningful action. The challenge now was to figure out how to demonstrate her genuine remorse and commitment to change. This question loomed large, and she struggled to find a clear path forward. During her suspension, Rebecca experienced a profound sense of isolation. The absence of her usual work routine rendered the days monotonous, and the solitude in her Charlotte apartment grew increasingly oppressive. The silence of her surroundings was a constant reminder of her recent mistakes, and the weight of shame was nearly unbearable. One morning, as she prepared her coffee, she was overwhelmed by a flood of childhood memories. Growing up in a small North Carolina town, Rebecca had been surrounded by her parents' traditional and conservative views. She had been accustomed to hearing derogatory comments about people from different races and cultures. At the time, she had absorbed these beliefs without question, accepting them as an inherent part of her upbringing. Sitting at her kitchen table, Rebecca found herself lost in reflection, revisiting a conversation she had with her father during her teenage years. His words, spoken with an authoritative tone, had always stuck with her. Remember, Rebecca, the world is divided into those who have and those who don't. Those who have should always remember to protect what's theirs. These words echoed powerfully in her mind. For the first time, she felt the full weight of the beliefs she had carried with her throughout her life. She began to question everything she had been taught, her attitudes, her values, and how deeply ingrained prejudices had shaped her actions and decisions. Feeling a desperate need for guidance, Rebecca reached for her phone and dialed her mother's number. Her mother had always been a source of comfort and stability during difficult times, and Rebecca hoped that speaking to her might offer some clarity. When her mother answered, her familiar voice provided an immediate sense of solace, but also a hint of what Rebecca feared might be an uncomfortable conversation. "Hi, Mom," Rebecca began, her voice tentative. "Hi, dear. How are you?" Her mother's voice was gentle, but Rebecca could detect an underlying concern. I've been reflecting a lot lately. About how I was raised and the things I learned growing up. I've come to realize that maybe I absorbed some ideas that weren't right." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Rebecca felt the tension build. "What do you mean by that?" her mother asked, her tone cautious. "I mean that I've been thinking about what happened with that passenger and the police officer. I've come to understand that my behavior and attitudes were shaped by a worldview I never questioned before. But I want to change, Mom. I need to change." Her mother was silent for a moment before responding, her voice soft and reflective. "Rebecca, you've always been a person of integrity. We've raised you to be strong and assertive, to stand your ground, and not let anyone take advantage of you. But you also need to recognize that the world is multifaceted, filled with shades of gray rather than just black and white. It's a positive sign that you're questioning things now, that you're critically examining your beliefs. However, don't be too hard on yourself. We all make mistakes. It's part of being human." "I understand," Mom, Rebecca replied, her voice trembling with a mixture of guilt and resolve. "But this isn't just about making a mistake. It's about realizing that the way I've been thinking and the assumptions I've held were never questioned before. And now I see that I can't keep living with these outdated perspectives." After hanging up, Rebecca felt a tumultuous blend of relief and sorrow. Her reflections were guiding her toward a challenging but essential transformation. Over the following days, she immersed herself in an array of resources, books, documentaries, and articles on racism, white privilege, and social justice. Each page she turned, and each video she watched, offered her a new lens through which to view the world, revealing truths she had previously been blind to. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment on number 4 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. One evening, as she watched a documentary about the civil rights movement in America, Rebecca found herself overwhelmed with emotion. The harrowing stories of injustice, systemic oppression, and the profound suffering endured by Black individuals moved her deeply. Tears streamed down her face as she grappled with her sense of shame for having previously ignored these harsh realities. At the same time, a strong and growing urge to contribute to meaningful change began to take root within her. Michael's words from the interview echoed in her mind. "We need more dialogue and understanding, and less judgment." Those words lingered, haunting her and propelling her toward action. Rebecca recognized the urgent need to initiate this dialogue, not only with others but also with herself. Determined to take tangible steps, she began searching for awareness groups and training sessions focused on prejudice and racial discrimination. She knew that a genuine transformation required a deep understanding of her own biases and an active effort to overcome them. The following week, Rebecca discovered an online course offered by a social justice organization based in Charlotte. The course promised to tackle systemic racism and provide practical strategies for addressing it in daily life. Without hesitation, Rebecca enrolled, understanding that this was merely the beginning of a long and challenging journey of self-discovery and growth. As she began the course, Rebecca felt a mixture of nervousness and hope. Each session brought new insights, and with every passing day, she felt her heart opening a bit more. She came to realize that while feeling remorseful was painful, it was also an essential gateway to personal growth. "I am changing," Rebecca thought to herself as she diligently took notes on key lessons. "And I will continue to change because it is necessary, because it is the right thing to do." After weeks of intense reflection and learning, Rebecca knew she needed to go further. She felt a compelling urge to confront Michael Johnson, the man she had wronged so profoundly. She needed to look him in the eye and offer a heartfelt apology, not only for her behavior during the flight, but also for the years of blindness to her prejudices. Though it was a daunting task, she recognized it as a crucial step in her journey. One afternoon, summoning all her courage, Rebecca set out to find Michael. She conducted an online search and discovered that he worked at a police precinct in Charlotte. Determined, she decided to visit his workplace, fully aware that it might be uncomfortable for both of them. The next day, dressed in simple attire and with her heart pounding, Rebecca drove to the precinct. As she arrived, she paused for a moment in front of the building, taking a deep breath to steady herself before stepping out of the car. Each step toward the entrance felt increasingly heavy. Her throat was dry, her hands clammy, but she pressed on. Inside, she approached the reception desk where a professional-looking receptionist greeted her with a polite smile. "Hello, how can I assist you today?" the receptionist inquired. "Hi, my name is Rebecca Collins," Rebecca said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm here to speak with Officer Michael Johnson." The receptionist regarded her with curiosity, asking, "Do you have an appointment with him?" "No, I don't," Rebecca replied, feeling the weight of her own words. "But it's personal, and it's very important." The receptionist hesitated but eventually made a call to Michael's office. After a brief conversation, she gestured for Rebecca to wait. A few moments later, Michael appeared at the lobby door, his uniform sharply contrasting with Rebecca's casual attire. His expression shifted from surprise to a guarded curiosity as he saw her standing there. They locked eyes, and the silence between them was thick with unspoken emotions and the gravity of the situation. Rebecca took a deep breath and took a hesitant step forward, trying to find the right words to express her feelings. She looked directly at Officer Johnson, her voice wavering with a mix of apprehension and determination. "Officer Johnson," she began, her voice nearly faltering under the weight of her emotions, "I know I don't have any right to ask for anything, but I need to speak with you. Please, if you could spare a moment." Michael regarded her for a moment, his eyes serious but not unkind. He nodded slightly, acknowledging her plea. "Let's step outside," he suggested, gesturing toward the door. They walked out of the building and headed towards a bench situated in front of it. As they sat down, Rebecca felt a surge of vulnerability and exposure. Yet she understood that facing this moment was a crucial part of her journey. With a shaky breath, she began, "I've been reflecting intensely on what occurred during that flight, and I've come to realize that my actions were deeply wrong on multiple levels. I treated you in a manner that was not only unfair but also prejudiced, and for that, I am profoundly sorry." Michael remained silent, his gaze steady as he listened to her. Rebecca continued, her voice struggling to maintain composure as the emotion choked her words. "I grew up with ingrained beliefs and biases that I never took the time to question. These prejudices have shaped who I became, and I understand now how wrong that was. Since the incident, I've been actively working to change. I've enrolled in courses, read extensively about racism, and am earnestly trying to dismantle these biases within myself. I am truly sorry for the hurt I caused you and for my ignorance." Her words were punctuated by tears, the depth of her remorse evident in her voice. Michael took a deep breath, his expression reflecting a mixture of empathy and caution. "Rebecca," he began, I appreciate that you took the time to come here and express your remorse. I won't pretend that what happened didn't hurt me, not only because of your judgment, but because it brought back memories of all the times I've been unfairly judged before." He paused, his eyes searching for the right words. "But I also believe in the capacity for people to change. I've witnessed it myself. The real question is whether you genuinely want to change, or if this is merely a response to the immediate pressure you're feeling." Rebecca felt his words strike her deeply, like a painful but necessary confrontation. She nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. "I understand why you're questioning my motive," she said softly, her voice trembling. "And all I can offer is my commitment to change, not because of external pressure, not because of any career implications, but because I've come to recognize that the world I understood, the way I perceived things, was fundamentally flawed. This is something I need to address for my growth and the betterment of those around me." Michael studied her for a moment before finally exhaling a sigh of contemplation. "True change is never easy," he said with a measured tone. "It's a long and arduous process. However, if you are genuinely committed to this journey, then perhaps something positive can emerge from all of this. What matters most now is how you proceed from here." Rebecca nodded, feeling a sense of relief mixed with a deep understanding of the challenges ahead. "Thank you for taking the time to listen to me," she said, her voice sincere. "And thank you for allowing me this opportunity to apologize." Michael responded with a small, reassuring smile, a gesture of goodwill that meant a great deal to Rebecca. "Take care, Rebecca," he said as he rose to his feet. "And if you need any support on this journey, don't hesitate to reach out." Rebecca watched as Michael walked away, feeling a blend of relief and renewed determination. She knew this meeting was merely the beginning of a much longer process, but for the first time, she felt as though she was moving in the right direction. The path ahead would be challenging, but it was crucial for her redemption and growth. Over the following week, Rebecca focused on preparing for the next step in her journey, a deeper, more comprehensive conversation with Michael about racism, prejudice, and the process of change. She was resolute in her intention to do more than just offer an apology. She wanted to gain a profound understanding of the impact of her actions and discover ways she could contribute to fostering a more just and equitable world. Michael had agreed to Rebecca's proposal for a more detailed discussion, and they arranged to meet at a local cafe in Charlotte. The cafe's ambience was calm and inviting, with soft lighting and a relaxed atmosphere, making it an ideal setting for their important and challenging conversation. When Rebecca arrived at the cafe, she found Michael already seated at a table near the window, his posture suggesting he had been waiting for a while. He rose from his chair as she approached and greeted her with a solemn nod. The seriousness in his eyes was tempered by a faint smile, a subtle gesture that seemed to recognize and appreciate the effort she had made to come. "Thank you so much for coming, Michael," Rebecca said as she settled into her seat across from him. Her tone was warm, filled with genuine gratitude. "I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me." Michael adjusted his chair slightly, his expression thoughtful as he responded, "Of course, Rebecca. I believe it's important for us to have this conversation. It's a significant step forward for both of us, and I think it's crucial that we take it." If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 5 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Rebecca's smile widened, a sign of her relief and appreciation for his openness to dialogue. She ordered a coffee from the waitress, and as they waited, she began to share her recent experiences. "Over the past few weeks, I've been immersing myself in the literature about racism, examining its manifestations in daily life, and exploring how structural prejudice impacts not just those directly affected but society at large," she began, striving to maintain a composed demeanor. "I've come to understand the necessity of acknowledging one's privilege and how our actions, even when unintentional, can perpetuate injustice." Michael listened intently, his gaze reflecting both curiosity and critical evaluation. After a moment of silence, he said, "It's encouraging to see your dedication to understanding these complex issues. However, intellectual understanding alone isn't sufficient. The real challenge lies in how you apply that knowledge in practical terms." Rebecca nodded in agreement, recognizing the validity of Michael's point. "I completely understand, and that's precisely why I'm here. I want to learn how I can be a more effective ally and contribute to meaningful change." Michael took a deep breath, clearly deliberating the best way to guide her. One crucial aspect is actively listening to the experiences of those directly affected by racism, he began. "It's not just about hearing their stories, but truly empathizing with the pain and struggles they endure. Often we listen but fail to act upon the information we've received." Rebecca considered Michael's words thoughtfully, her expression reflecting her earnest desire to learn. "So what practical steps can I take to turn my understanding into concrete action?" she asked. Michael paused to gather his thoughts before responding. "Starting with sensitivity training and fostering discussions about these issues in your workplace is a good beginning. But it's also essential to engage with community initiatives, support organizations dedicated to fighting injustice, and use your voice to advocate for equality in various forums." Rebecca reflected on these suggestions, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for Michael's willingness to offer guidance. "I'm committed to doing my best," she said with sincerity. "I know this journey will be challenging, but I'm ready to take it on." Michael's expression softened, and he nodded in approval. "That's what truly matters. Continue to educate yourself, and more importantly, ensure that your actions consistently align with the values you're working to uphold." Their conversation continued for several hours, with Rebecca absorbing every insight and piece of advice Michael offered. She understood that there was still much to learn, but she also recognized that acknowledging her past mistakes and committing to personal growth was a vital first step. When they finally parted ways, Rebecca felt a sense of calm and readiness she hadn't experienced in a long time. She knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but for the first time she felt prepared to confront them. Each day moving forward, she resolved to embody the values she had embraced, understanding that the true measure of her journey would not be the destination but the meaningful steps she took along the way. Rebecca Collins meticulously prepared for another day at work. With 15 years of experience as a flight attendant, her routine was second nature. She dressed with care, slipping into her dark blue uniform and adjusting her neckerchief with practiced precision. Her blonde hair was carefully pinned into a flawless bun, and as she gazed at her reflection in the mirror, she scrutinized every detail. Everything appeared just as it should, in line with the familiarity of countless similar mornings. This particular morning, the flight was scheduled from Charlotte to New York. The aircraft was being prepped for departure, and Rebecca joined her fellow crew members for the essential pre-flight checks. Despite the routine nature of her job, she found great enjoyment in it: the excitement of travel, the brief yet engaging interactions with passengers, and the sense of authority she held as she orchestrated the organization within the plane. As the boarding process began, Rebecca observed each passenger closely. It was a habit she had developed over the years, one that had woven itself into her assumptions and biases. Her gaze fell upon a black man in a police uniform as he boarded the aircraft. He walked with confidence to his seat in first class. Rebecca's brow furrowed in confusion. A cascade of questions flooded her mind. What was he doing here? How could he afford a seat in first class? Once boarding was completed and the plane was preparing for takeoff, Rebecca approached the man. Her tone was frosty, nearly accusatory. "May I see your ticket, sir?" she asked, her smile rigid, but her eyes conveyed a different story. Michael Johnson, organizing his belongings, looked up with a mixture of surprise and understanding. He had encountered this sort of reaction before. "Certainly," he responded calmly, offering her his ticket with a friendly smile. Rebecca took the ticket and examined it with exaggerated scrutiny, as though she anticipated finding an issue. Everything was in order. Reluctantly, she returned the ticket. "Thank you," she said curtly, lacking her usual warmth. "I just wanted to ensure you were in the right place." Michael's smile remained, though a trace of disappointment flickered in his eyes. "No problem. I understand," he replied, aiming to diffuse any tension. He was accustomed to such behavior, but it didn't make it any less difficult to endure. As Rebecca walked away, a nagging unease settled within her. Throughout the flight, she found herself casting occasional glances at Michael, still grappling with the sense that he didn't belong in first class. As the plane ascended, Rebecca struggled to focus on her responsibilities, the discomfort she felt refusing to dissipate. Michael, meanwhile, remained composed in his seat, engrossed in a book, and seemingly indifferent to the inquisitive stares from other passengers. Despite the clear skies and smooth flight at 35,000 feet, Rebecca's sense of discomfort persisted, setting the stage for the events that would unfold. The flight continued toward New York, and first-class passengers were comfortably settled. Rebecca attended to her duties serving drinks and checking on passengers, but her attention repeatedly drifted back to Michael, who maintained his calm demeanor. When she approached him again to serve coffee, her attempt to keep her tone neutral was marred by a subtle edge of disdain. "Coffee, sir?" she asked, her voice betraying a hint of her inner conflict. "Yes, please." "Black, no sugar," Michael replied with a courteous smile. As Rebecca prepared the coffee, her prejudiced thoughts continued to churn. She found herself grappling with an uncomfortable curiosity about why a man like him was seated in first class, as if it were a deviation from the norm. When she delivered the coffee, her restraint faltered. "I assume you're traveling for work," she inquired, striving for casualness, but unable to fully mask her probing tone. Michael looked up from his book, meeting her gaze with an awareness of her underlying implication. "Yes, I am. I'm a police officer in Atlanta," he said, pausing to observe her reaction before adding, "I'm heading to New York for a conference on public safety." Rebecca tried to conceal her surprise, her expectations having been upended. The revelation unsettled her further. "Oh, I see," she said, her voice betraying her internal conflict. "It must be quite interesting." Michael sensed the shift in Rebecca's demeanor almost immediately. Her discomfort was palpable, an unspoken tension that hung in the air like an unwelcome fog. He understood all too well the direction the conversation could take, and with a practiced ease, he chose to diffuse the situation rather than let it spiral out of control. As he prepared to return to the solace of his book, Rebecca, driven by a blend of curiosity and a subtle bias she couldn't entirely mask, pressed on with a question that seemed to tumble out of her almost against her will. "Did the company pay for your first-class ticket?" she asked. Her voice carried a hint of suspicion, the kind that wrapped itself around the question like a cloak, revealing more than she intended. Michael's face, usually so composed, hardened briefly as he processed her question. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, perhaps hurt, perhaps resolved, before he steadied himself and responded. "I covered the difference for the first class out of my pocket. I prefer to travel more comfortably when I can." His tone was calm, but there was a subtle gravity in his words, as if he was struggling to uphold a sense of dignity against the backdrop of Rebecca's veiled insinuation. It was as though he was not merely defending a personal choice, but also confronting an unspoken judgment that sought to diminish his worth. Rebecca felt a shiver of discomfort ripple through her. The realization that she had crossed an invisible line hit her with a jarring intensity. She couldn't shake the nagging sense that she was grappling with something deeper, a resistance within herself to accept that Michael, like anyone else, had a rightful place in that space. Her attempt to regain control of the situation felt almost hollow. "I understand," she said, her voice faltering slightly as she struggled to mask the unease that had taken root. "If you need anything else, I'll be around." She hurried away, her brisk steps betraying a mounting discomfort she could barely contain. The brief encounter hadn't escaped the notice of other passengers, whose disapproving glances spoke volumes. They had perceived the underlying hostility in Rebecca's tone, and the disquiet in the cabin grew. Michael sighed deeply, returning to his book, though his mind was far from the pages. The sting of veiled hostility was not a new experience for him, yet each instance left a mark, a reminder of the barriers he faced. The quiet hum of the aircraft did little to soothe the disquiet he felt inside. Rebecca, meanwhile, grappled with a profound sense of self-reproach. Michael's composed response had cut through her defenses, making her feel as though he had seen past her veneer and exposed her insecurities. The sensation was jarring, leaving her feeling vulnerable and uncomfortably naked in her self-awareness. As the minutes dragged on, the weight of her actions settled heavily on her conscience. Despite her best efforts to stay busy, the disquiet remained, a persistent reminder of the discord she had created. The flight, while proceeding smoothly above the clouds, was marked by a palpable tension within the cabin. Rebecca's attempts to distract herself were in vain as she found herself unable to escape the uncomfortable aftermath of her interaction with Michael. Her nervousness began to manifest in her movements. She fumbled with drink trays and appeared increasingly flustered as she went about her duties. Observant passengers, some of whom had witnessed the earlier exchange, watched her with an air of judgment, their eyes reflecting an expectation of rectitude that she was struggling to meet. Feeling the weight of scrutiny bearing down on her, Rebecca avoided looking directly at Michael, her gaze fixed firmly on her tasks, as if they were a refuge from her mounting unease. In the row adjacent to Michael, a young couple whispered urgently to each other, clearly troubled by what they had witnessed. One of them, a man clutching a smartphone, appeared to be recording something. Rebecca noticed but couldn't quite discern whether she was the subject of the recording. "Did you see how she spoke to him?" the woman beside the man whispered, her voice tinged with dismay. "Yeah, that was strange. Completely unnecessary," the man replied, his eyes still focused on his phone, capturing the moment with a sense of detached concern. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 6 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Rebecca overheard a portion of the conversation and felt her stomach tighten with unease. She recognized that her behavior had been inappropriate, but the growing anxiety about the potential repercussions began to overshadow her initial remorse. Instead of addressing her actions directly, she found herself consumed with a need to rationalize her behavior, trying to convince herself that she was in the right. As she moved to the front of the cabin, her mind was clouded with worries about Michael, the couple observing her, and the unsettling possibility that her actions might have been captured on camera. Anxiety quickly started to bubble up inside her. At the same time, Michael was struggling to focus on his book, unable to ignore the pervasive sense of discomfort that seemed to permeate the atmosphere around him. He could feel the weight of the stairs and hear the hushed murmurs, sensing that something was amiss. Although he had encountered subtle forms of racism before manifested in veiled comments and covert actions, what troubled him the most at this moment was the intense feeling of being scrutinized and watched by everyone around him. Determined to prevent the situation from escalating further, Michael decided to approach Rebecca discreetly as she passed by his row once more. "Excuse me, flight attendant. Could I have a moment of your time?" Michael's voice was calm but carried an undercurrent of firmness that Rebecca couldn't ignore. She turned around, her expression a mix of surprise and apprehension at his request. "Of course, sir. How can I assist you?" Rebecca replied, struggling to keep her composure intact. Michael lowered his voice to ensure their conversation remained private, away from the ears of other passengers. "I noticed that our last exchange might have made you uncomfortable, and I just wanted to clear the air. There's no reason for any tension between us. We're both here to do our jobs." Rebecca was momentarily taken aback by his direct approach, but appreciated the opportunity to address the issue head-on. I'm sorry if I came across as rude," she stammered, her voice tinged with guilt. "That wasn't my intention. I've been a bit overwhelmed lately." Michael nodded in understanding, recognizing the complexity of the situation. "I understand. We all have our moments of stress. However, it's crucial to acknowledge when our biases impact how we interact with others. We all have room to grow in that regard." Rebecca felt a sharp pang of guilt as she realized the truth in his words. "You're right," she admitted, her voice sincere. "I shouldn't have jumped to conclusions. I apologize for my behavior." Michael's expression softened as he detected the sincerity in her apology. "Apology accepted, and I appreciate you taking the time to address this. It's not always easy to confront these issues, but it's an important step." A sense of relief washed over Rebecca as she absorbed his words. "Thank you for your understanding. I'll make sure to improve." With that, Michael returned to his seat, and Rebecca resumed her duties with a renewed sense of lightness in her heart. The conversation had marked a significant turning point for her, a moment of self-reflection and personal growth. The flight continued without further incident, but the effects of their conversation lingered. When they landed in New York, Rebecca made a deliberate effort to bid Michael farewell as he disembarked. "Thank you for the conversation," she said, offering him a genuine smile. "Take care," Michael responded, nodding in encouragement. In the days that followed, Rebecca found herself reflecting deeply on the encounter. She recognized her mistakes and the weight of her actions, but she also felt a profound sense of gratitude for the lesson Michael had imparted. It was a powerful reminder to confront her own biases and strive for continual improvement. Rebecca felt a profound sense of purpose and renewed hope as she stood on the cusp of a new chapter in her life. Her journey of self-discovery and transformation was far from complete, but she was confident that she was heading in the right direction. With supportive allies like Michael by her side and the encouragement of a compassionate community, she felt well prepared to confront the challenges ahead and make a meaningful impact. The internal investigation by the airline into Rebecca's behavior was drawing to a close. After enduring a suspension period during which she immersed herself in community initiatives and participated actively in sensitivity training programs, Rebecca awaited the airline's decision regarding her future with bated breath. At the airline's headquarters in Charlotte, the review committee had convened in a formal conference room to deliberate over the final report of the investigation. The committee was composed of key figures: the Chief Human Resources Officer, the Operations Manager, and the Director of Diversity and Inclusion. This decision was pivotal, not only for Rebecca's career but also for the company's public image and credibility. Robert Hayes, the Director of Diversity and Inclusion, adjusted his glasses and addressed the room. "Are we all in agreement about the report and the recommendations it contains?" Karen Lee, the Chief Human Resources Officer, nodded affirmatively. "Yes, the report is thorough and comprehensive," she said. "Rebecca has made commendable strides and shown a sincere commitment to personal and professional growth. The pressing question now is whether she should be reinstated to her previous position." Laura Thompson, the Operations Manager, spoke up with a tone of conviction. "I believe Rebecca deserves the chance to return to her role. Her suspension period has been sufficient for introspection and re-education. Her active involvement in community and educational activities indicates that she is genuinely striving for improvement. However, we must also weigh the potential effects on her team and our company's public perception." Robert Hayes added his perspective. "We must acknowledge that some employees and passengers may still harbor reservations about our handling of the incident. It's crucial that any decision we make is communicated transparently and reflects our steadfast commitment to fostering equality and respect." The committee engaged in a thorough and thoughtful discussion, carefully considering each aspect of the case. After extensive deliberation, they reached a consensus. Rebecca would be given a second chance, with the stipulation that she continue her engagement in awareness programs and actively support diversity initiatives within the company. The following day, Rebecca was summoned to a meeting with the committee. As she walked into the room, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation and tension. She took her seat before the committee, her heart racing but her demeanor calm and composed. Karen Lee, her expression serious but empathetic, began to speak. "Rebecca, we appreciate your patience throughout this process. The committee has carefully reviewed your case and the findings of the internal investigation. We are now prepared to discuss the decision we have reached." Rebecca felt a tight knot in her stomach, but she steadied herself. "I'm ready to hear the decision," she replied, striving to maintain her composure and stay focused on the outcome. "After thoroughly reviewing your efforts to re-educate yourself and engage in various community activities," Karen began, her voice measured and professional, "the committee has decided to permit you to return to work. However, it's important to note that this approval is contingent upon specific conditions we believe are crucial for ensuring continued progress and accountability." If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 7 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Rebecca's eyes widened with a blend of anticipation and apprehension as she asked, "What are these conditions?" Laura stepped forward to clarify. "Firstly, you will be tasked with leading and implementing our company's diversity and inclusion programs. This responsibility encompasses organizing and overseeing regular training sessions designed to educate employees on diversity issues. You will also be expected to promote and coordinate events that contribute to creating a more inclusive and supportive work environment." Rebecca nodded, recognizing the gravity and significance of these duties. Robert then added, "In addition to these responsibilities, we will conduct periodic evaluations to assess your progress. These evaluations will be critical in monitoring your ongoing efforts and ensuring that you are consistently working towards our goals of inclusivity and improvement. It will be essential for you to remain open and responsive to feedback and constructive criticism, as this will help guide your development and effectiveness in your role." Rebecca's voice was steady as she responded, "Understood. I am fully committed to fulfilling these conditions and to actively working on promoting and advancing inclusion within the company." The committee members exchanged nods of approval. Karen's expression softened slightly as she spoke. "We are pleased with your commitment. As part of your initial duties, you will collaborate with our diversity team to review and enhance our sensitivity training programs. We have confidence in your ability to make a positive impact and drive meaningful change." Rebecca stood up, her heart pounding with a mixture of relief and renewed determination. She expressed her gratitude. "Thank you all for this opportunity. I am eager to contribute to creating a more inclusive work environment and will do my utmost to meet and exceed expectations." With her departure from the meeting room, Rebecca was filled with a sense of purpose and resolve. The opportunity to return to work wasn't merely a chance to make amends, but also a pivotal moment to spearhead change and inspire others to follow her lead. In the subsequent days, Rebecca threw herself into her new role, working closely with the diversity and inclusion team. They collaborated on developing innovative programs and refining training modules, all to foster a more equitable and inclusive workplace. The challenges were substantial, but Rebecca's dedication to her role and her desire to effect genuine change drove her forward. When the day of her return to work finally arrived, the office in Charlotte was abuzz with activity. Rebecca approached the familiar environment with a mix of nervousness and excitement. She had prepared extensively, not only to resume her duties but also to lead efforts that would cultivate respect and inclusivity throughout the company. Rebecca walked into the office, her heart racing with a mix of nervousness and anticipation. The familiar hum of activity was accompanied by a chorus of cheerful greetings and warm smiles from her colleagues, who seemed genuinely pleased to see her back. As she navigated through the office, she noticed the new posters about diversity and inclusion adorning the walls, a visible sign of the changes that had taken place in her absence. Each poster seemed to resonate with the commitment to fostering a more inclusive environment, reflecting a shared vision of progress and respect. The sight filled her with a sense of hope and renewed purpose, making her feel that this was more than just a return to work. It was the beginning of a meaningful journey toward transformation. Arriving at her office, Rebecca found a heartfelt welcome email from her colleagues, along with an invitation to a meeting with the diversity and inclusion team. The email, brimming with supportive words and encouragement, was a poignant reminder of the collective effort that had gone into creating a more inclusive workplace. As she opened the email, she felt a surge of gratitude for the support and enthusiasm that greeted her return, knowing that this was not just her journey but a shared commitment to making a positive impact. At the meeting, Rebecca was introduced to her new team, and her eyes met Marissa Green's. Marissa, the diversity manager, greeted her with a warm and encouraging smile. "Good morning, team," Marissa said, her voice carrying an undercurrent of excitement and hope. "It's truly wonderful to see everyone gathered here to celebrate Rebecca's return. We want to ensure that this new phase starts as smoothly and positively as possible." Marissa's words resonated deeply with Rebecca, who felt the weight of responsibility and the promise of change hanging in the air. Rebecca's response was heartfelt as she addressed the team. "Good morning, everyone. I'm genuinely excited to embark on this new chapter with all of you and to work together to make a meaningful difference." Her words were filled with a deep sense of commitment and eagerness to contribute, reflecting her readiness to embrace the challenges ahead and to lead with empathy and determination. Marissa outlined the new programs Rebecca would be leading, including a sensitivity workshop and a diversity panel discussion. The prospect of these initiatives was both invigorating and daunting, as they represented significant opportunities for growth and change. Marissa said, "It would be wonderful if you could take the lead on these events and also assist in developing new training materials." Rebecca's enthusiasm was palpable as she responded, "Absolutely. I'm here to support and contribute in any way I can." Her words were imbued with a sense of purpose, reflecting her determination to make a positive impact. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 8 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. After the meeting, Rebecca proceeded to the conference room for the sensitivity workshop. The room was filled with employees, each one eager to engage and learn. Michael, a key supporter, was present to offer his support. As Rebecca shook Michael's hand, she felt a wave of appreciation for his presence. "Michael, it's great to see you here," she said, her voice filled with warmth. "Your support means a lot to me and the team." Michael's response, "I'm here to support however I can," was a comforting affirmation of the collaborative effort to drive change. The workshop began with Rebecca sharing her journey and the lessons she had learned. "I'm here today because I believe that change begins with awareness and education," she told the attentive audience. Her words were delivered with genuine passion and conviction, reflecting her belief in the power of education to foster a more inclusive and respectful environment. The workshop was met with enthusiastic participation and positive feedback, and Rebecca felt a profound sense of fulfillment as she witnessed the impact of her efforts. After the event, as Rebecca engaged with attendees, Michael approached her with words of praise. "You did an excellent job today," he said, his tone reflecting sincere admiration. "The participants were engaged, and it seems like your message is being well received." Rebecca's response, "Thank you, Michael. I really hope this is just the beginning of a more lasting impact," was a reflection of her hope and determination to continue making a difference. As Rebecca continued to immerse herself in her new role, she began to see the tangible results of her efforts. The diversity and inclusion programs were being well received, and there was a growing sense of camaraderie and respect within the workplace. One quiet afternoon, an email from a colleague expressed heartfelt gratitude for the positive changes Rebecca had initiated. The email described how the new programs were creating a more welcoming environment and encouraging open discussions about diversity issues. Reading the email, Rebecca felt a deep sense of accomplishment and gratitude, reflecting on her journey and the progress made. That evening, Rebecca met Michael for coffee at the cafe where they had first discussed her journey. As they talked about the progress and impact of the recent changes, Rebecca felt a sense of connection and mutual support. "I'm thrilled with the progress we've made," she said, looking at Michael with a sense of fulfillment. "It's incredible to see how even small changes can transform a work environment." Michael's response, "And the most important thing is that you're doing this with an open heart and a genuine desire to create change," was a reassuring acknowledgement of her dedication and impact. As they raised their coffee cups in a toast to the future, Rebecca felt a profound sense of affirmation and hope. "To a fairer and more inclusive world," she said, her voice filled with determination and optimism. The toast was a symbolic gesture of their shared commitment to making a positive difference, and Rebecca felt that her journey of personal transformation had become a powerful mission to inspire and affect change, one step at a time. Thank you for joining us today. We've delved into a challenging scenario, exploring themes of personal bias, self-awareness, and the impact of our actions on others. As you reflect on what we've discussed, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What have you learned from this experience? Comment below with one insight or lesson you've gained and how you plan to apply it to your own life. If you liked this video, please leave your comment and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content like this. Your engagement helps us continue creating meaningful content and encourages conversations that matter. Thank you for being part of our community.